if a normal 17-year-old came out on any stage and didn't kind of explain a little bit of his context and how he got to where he is so fast without having a super rich connected dad, I'd be a little skeptical. So I'm going to go and give a little bit of my background and then hopefully dive in to how Gen Z is changing the way that not only young people consume media, but also older generations and some stuff like that. So basically, when I was super little, I would do all sorts of entrepreneurial things. So I'd go to my neighbor's house, pick out the cool rocks, go back to their door and sell it back at their door. I'd start lemonade stands. I'd have my sisters run them during the day. And I did all kinds of stuff like that. So my parents were super trying to figure out what's wrong with their kid. And in the 8th grade, I started a homework selling network. So I would have my friends who were insanely smart and a lot more talented at school than I was do the homework, and then I would go sell it to other kids. That lasted a solid month, and then I almost got suspended from middle school. Around the same time, I was diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, all that fun stuff. So I was super depressed, thought I was stupid and worthless. I heard the word entrepreneur from my dad for the first time. And so I Googled ADHD entrepreneur. This amazing guy named Cameron Herold, his TED Talk came on the screen. Let's raise kids to be entrepreneurs. I watched that TED Talk, reached out to Cameron 5 or 6 times, and Cameron replied. We got on a Skype call and he gave me advice. He's like, find something you're passionate about, start a company around it, make some money, do whatever. So, and of course it was a lot more detailed than that, but I went through and followed Cameron's advice exactly, and then launched my first social media company where we ended up helping over 40 medium-sized businesses, just managing their social media accounts and stuff like that. And then me and my friends are outside playing basketball. So fast forward a year and a half, like that's going cool, still hanging out with friends. I'm in high school still. And then me and my friends are outside playing basketball. We're playing hoops. We're out there for like 3 or 4 hours because it's summer in Cleveland. We don't get nice weather very much. So we were out there for a long time. And then we come back in the garage. We're all drinking water, Gatorade, whatever. And everyone is scrolling through Twitter like this. And I'm like, the hell? Like, from my social media background, the amount of ads that were being wasted, the amount of money wasted that these companies were paying their employees to put out good content, and it just wasn't connecting. So I was like, is this a generational problem or is this a social media problem? I still thought I was a millennial at the time. So I go back and I start doing more research and I figure out this Gen Z thing. And normally I don't believe in generational marketing because when I was first starting, everyone is a millennial marketing expert under the age of 30. So I was super skeptical when I was doing more research on Gen Z and some different stuff like that. And I figured out that Generation Z, which is consumers under the age of 21, is the most unique, diverse, and influential generation to ever walk the face of the earth. And I understand, like, even when I was telling like my own mentors and business friends a couple years ago, like, this Gen Z thing is super cool, they're like, oh, dude, all young people are the same. It doesn't matter. And I'm like, no. So I was doing more research, and like people ask me all the time, so young millennials and Gen Z, what's like the #1 biggest difference? And it's, as millennials got older, they adapted to technology, right? So it was like, okay, laptop, iPad, iPhone, iPod. It's like it was almost a crescendo of tech as they were coming up. But my generation is the first generation that doesn't know a world where they can't FaceTime their friend, call their mom, and order a pizza all at the same time. Now, that's super interesting because, like I said, as we were scrolling through Twitter, because of those same stereotypes, everyone's like, oh, Connor, you have ADD, ha ha ha, and you can't focus in class or on Twitter when you're scrolling through. And I'm like, okay, those things might be true, but we don't have the attention span of a goldfish. It's just that we've come up with a really good bullshit decipherer for when we view content. So what we do is in those 5, 6, up to 8 seconds, when we're scrolling through content at such a rapid pace, we use that time to figure out what content we deem worthy to us. Because we've been living in a world with a constant stream of information through like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, now Snapchat, where things are so quick and rapid and everyone is putting out content because what's social media for? To portray the fakest version of yourself for young people, right? So what does everyone want to do? They want to consistently talk about how great they are. They want to engage with other people about how great they are. So we're living in a world with a lot of noise and not a lot of depth, right? It's all a lot of surface level stuff. So we've created this, like, it's almost, tech is an extension of ourselves in our own brain. Like, that's literally how it feels. When we're scrolling through social, it's literally second nature for us when we look at it to be like, okay, good, bad, in that 5 to 8 second period. So when I talk to brands a lot, and especially media companies now, it's like when you're putting out content, how can we capture in that 5 to 8 seconds to really get them to focus on it. Because another story is like when I was super, super little, my mom set out Legos for me when I was 7. And she all like a plethora of different kinds of Legos, and then she had the directions on the other side. And I would of course, I would just not even look at the directions, and I would focus intently for 6 hours building Legos, building whatever I wanted. But when my sister built Legos, she has like a 4.6 and has a full ride to Johns Hopkins. She would go in and she'd be like, okay, the directions, here's how we do things. And then I would spend 5 or 6 hours building whatever I wanted. Now that's interesting now because at that same time when I was little, I could not focus for 5 seconds in the classroom. But when I had the ability to create something, I would literally focus on it for 5 and 6 hours. It's the same thing now with my generation in social media. We can't really focus if the guidelines are given to us so for instance, let's say a company like Toys R Us, like they're on Musical.ly, let's say, they sponsor someone on Musical.ly, and they say, hey, our products are this percentage off of this, 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 and this. And it's like, that's the same, that's like giving me the directions as a child. Like, that's not interesting, that's not engaging. Why don't you give young people the tools to create, innovate themselves, to make themselves feel like they truly do have the power? And the other thing that I talk about a lot is my version of ROI. So not necessarily return on investment, which is how a lot of brands and media companies are measuring their KPIs, but return on interaction. So how many meaningful touches can you get with their consumer to really get them to convert, build a relationship, things like that? It's easier to sell to a friend than it is to a stranger. So I really love what Kathleen from HBR said yesterday about how they're doing their funnel and getting a lot of the touch points on the consumers through social and even creating the Facebook group and stuff like that, because that's the kinds of stuff that you have to do if you want to curate the meaningful relationship. So yeah, I would love to answer any questions that anyone might have about Gen Z, future media consumption, different things like that.
So you just came at that really, really fast, but I was tracking it all. And I thought what was really interesting is, and it's a bit anecdotal, but is this whole idea of, and I've heard various presenters say 0.5 seconds to get someone to visually decide whether or not they're going to engage with your content, 2.5 seconds to make the choice about whether they're going to stay with the content. And I'm guessing that a lot of what you're talking about is that same sort of thing that's now transcending Gen Z. And in some respects, Gen Z, we've talked about market leaders and we've talked about power users, but in terms of mobile, Gen Zers, go ahead. Gen Zers being able to sort of be the window to the experience because it is native, while the rest of us who are older figure it out. Have you had, because I know you go to a lot of universities and I know you go to a lot of conferences to talk to people about this.
Yeah.
Are you getting feedback on that?
On the part that you described?
Yeah, which is that your generation, because you are so intuitive and native to particularly the mobile platform, are sort of the thought leaders in terms of consumption. So
I know that there's a difference between media and brands, but 80% of young people don't trust any of the marketing that brands do, and this is based on pure global data research, but 95% of parents in the United States admit that their Gen Z children under the age of 21 influence up to 70% of all in-house purchases. So I take a step back and I'm like, shit, if you think those are the only kinds of decisions that they're dictating in the household, then you're kind of ignorant, because a lot of times, I see even in my own house and in my friends' houses, the parents are going to the kids to look stuff up, give them feedback, find different stuff, because they know that they technically know as much as parents do now, just because of this. We've lived in a world of this. We know how to use this better than that. Parents are starting to realize that, so they're starting to honestly automatically trust their kids to come up with boom, 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 and boom. I remember one time, a couple weeks ago, my dad was like, my sister's Madeline, she's 15. He was like, hey, Madeline, could you look up the price of this mattress in the store? And Madeline looked it up, and she was like, no, we have to go to Levin to get it at this price. So my sister, who's 15, is making purchasing decisions for my dad, who's 50. what's crazier is the tactics my sister's using through social is my dad is starting to use when he's doing his social media stuff too. My dad might not be on Twitter yet. He might still be confused by Snapchat, but I promise you on Facebook, he's consuming content and behaving the same way as my sister does on other platforms. So the other thing I see is like Gen Z is not only setting the precedent for how people are like posting online and engaging, but they're also setting the precedent for their characteristics that are bleeding into the marketplace as well.
All right, so this is a two-part question or two questions. I don't know which, but you can decide.
Happy to answer both.
So one of the things we've been talking about here are the signals to identify fake news versus real news.
Yeah.
And in the digital world and in the social media world, the signals are gone or we don't know what they are. So
what do you mean by signals? Like how we can tell if something's fake or not?
Yes.
Okay.
And so the two questions are, one is how does Gen Z view that in terms of looking for the credible information versus fake information? And the second question is, when your friends are scrolling through the Twitter feeds, what are the signals they use to stop and make that split second, I'm going to look at this versus I'm not going to look at that?
Oh, fake news. I wish that I had the answer to that question. I don't know. And to be honest with you, a part of me doesn't even think it's a Gen Z question, because I think the characteristics of my generation have bled so far into the marketplace. Like, we've lived in a world where we've only had social media around for 12 years, right? So like parents on as the new platforms have bled all the way through are only starting in the past year or two to actively use these as much as we are. And so what I think is that same BS meter that we have, they're starting to implement too. And I think my answer to the fake news thing in general is I think science, I talk about this all the time. There's three parts of the brain. There's the cortex, which is your thoughts and actions, surface level stuff. There's the limbic part of your brain, which is your emotions, so love, hate, feelings, stuff like that. And then there's the reptilian part of your brain, which is the oldest part of your brain. It's the same part of the brain that animals have, and that controls your subconscious thinking, your gut feeling, your habits, and stuff like that. Now it's okay, how is and the reptilian has dominance over the other two parts of the brain. Now, the reptilian part of the brain, how that's formed, or how the subconscious thinking is formed, is through association. It's the most powerful thing ever. That's why I'm so bullish on influencer marketing for brands and different things like that. So if you look at all of these credible outlets, the reason that we're so believe it when we see it is because the reptilian part of the brain has been fed for so long. This is real, this is real, this is real. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in a 1, 2, 3, 4 year window, but I don't think we'll be able to figure that out right now. What stops us looking? It could be some 6'6" dude throwing down a slam dunk, or it could be some chick in a bikini when we're scrolling through. I think GIFs are the most powerful thing. The most powerful thing ever, because it shows association, it's actionable, and everyone can resonate with it. Taking something from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and if you're a media company and you show it going like this, or a dancing move, people are gonna stop and they're gonna see what you're talking about. If you said okay, what specifically for this, and this, I'd be able to have more context, but it's so broad because it's really anything interesting. All I know is that if someone feels like you're trying to get something from them, especially if they're young, because of that BS meter, if you ask anything regardless, they're gonna be okay, screw you, boom. That's, I would say, and don't put percentages or numbers, because they'll be okay, well, we've seen over 500,000 advertisements every year since we've been 8. We're definitely don't really care about how much percentage off you're giving, because what people don't realize is if you're saying, oh, we're giving 20% off of our subscription this month, it's okay, but we're still paying you. It doesn't matter how much you're giving off, so you're still asking.
So this is all really interesting stuff, but it seems like you're using a technological constraint to talk about an entire generation. Mm-hmm. And is there any difference between a power mobile user and then somebody who's 16 with a cell phone?
So are you saying that an older person who has the same access to information and technology as a young person might be behaving the same way?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, based on what you were saying.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest differentiator between the older power mobile phone user and someone in my generation is the lens we look at the world with. So, for instance, my generation, when we were young, the recession, like we saw our parents go through a recession. We saw houses being foreclosed on. We weren't going out to eat as much. We've lived in a world full of constant wars, constant terrorism attacks. We're the only generation to do so. And like look at like what just happened with politics. So like things are very like tension oriented, right? So it's like we're viewing like we're super conservative. The millennial Gen X type generation, if you ask younger kids what they want to be when they got older, well, I think the answer would probably be like a firefighter, a basketball player, a baseball player, a football player. What's interesting is a lot of the studies coming out now, and I see this because like I'm weird. Like I'll go to my sister's elementary school and I'll start asking little kids questions and stuff. The number one thing that's being answered right now is in the research and even in what I'm noticing was 72% of young people now want to be entrepreneurs. Now it's like, okay, well, how does that correlate to like the lens and how we view the world? It's like, okay, we saw all of this shitty stuff happen to our parents. We see where the world's going. We want to be self-sufficient in how we're behaving. So like we don't want to rely on anyone else. So we're going to be conservative in that sense. That's different from other generations. And like that's only one of the examples, but I think all of those experiences that make our generation different, tied with the power we have with the cell phone, like I think the lens we look at the world compared with the tech make us a lot more powerful and interesting from a consumer standpoint and how we consume media than like my dad, who I would consider like a mobile power user. But once again, this is very soon, so it'll be interesting over the next couple of years to see how their characteristics are bleeding into the marketplace so everyone can better cater to like X, Y, and Z. And by the way, I think generational marketing is like still primarily bullshit. I just think that like it provides contextual clues to better engage, understand, and connect with any kind of consumer.
And let me just say that the University of Missouri and the Department of Strategic Communication are experts in the Yaya and somewhat the millennial, but in the Yaya, youth and young adult market. And some of what you're saying jibes with their primary research that about the BS meter and about other things that would lend itself to. So look at the research. Go to Yaya Research under what we do inside strategic communication in terms of just another source of insight into sort of younger consumers. And this is the last question.
Sure. I was just going to ask you about influencer marketing. You said you're really bullish on that. So explain like why you are, and I know you kind of touched on it, but why so bullish? Where do you see the future of that going?
I don't even think it's a question of where do you see the future with that going. I think there's no future without it. So I don't even think we're going to be living in an advertising world in the next 3 years. And when I say that, I mean, like advertising implies like talking. Like I don't think there's going to be any more brands talking because people are so we don't give a shit. Like no one actually cares what a brand has to say. So we just did this campaign with Sprint, and the whole idea was we do not want the brand to be involved in anything, nothing. And it was like, so you guys should totally check out the video. Go to Jake Paul's YouTube channel. We sponsored the dude to jump off of a helicopter onto a trampoline, and then jump on the trampoline in the middle of the ocean into the ocean. And the whole entire premise of it was live unlimited. Why? Because our data plan is pretty sick, but we don't want to talk about it. We want Jake to talk about it for us. And the only time the brand was implemented it was at the end when it said hashtag live unlimited, Sprint's logo, boom. And that was a 5-second thing. And so when I'm talking about like the future of how we're consuming stuff, no one cares what a brand has to say. Like we're gonna live in a future of literally cool content and engagement. So like I even think Taco Bell is wasting their time tweeting like dumb GIFs back at everyone. And like, no, I think GIFs are sick when they're used right, but it's like overkill what they're doing. So brands are like, oh my gosh, this is so cool to do. And then they're going all in on what's cool. And then by that time, we're like, whoa, hold on, you're not as cool as you think you are. Like that's literally what happens every single time. So a proxy to better get in the mind of your consumer, like science backs this up, is like literally influencer marketing. Give them the tools to make your brand look amazing for that short period of time. Because I promise you, if I went and asked any of those young people, even the old people who watched that video, so what do you think of Sprint? they'd be like, oh, cool, fun, like crazy, like whatever, right? And they might only answer that question like that for 5 minutes, but I promise you we're gonna come at them 10 more times with touch points exactly like that. So in the next 6 months, when I ask them that question, they're gonna say, we're awesome. And looks like we're out of time, but a good example of that is T-Mobile.
So, Connor, first of all, thank you for being in the room. I mean, it's provocative and it's interesting, and the whole idea of generational, like speaking to Ben's point, can you really represent a whole generation? No. I mean, I don't think so. But I think what we're finding in primary research is that, to Ben's point, certain people are consuming content at different ages in different ways. But certainly, anecdotally, what you're describing describes my children who do help me shop for cars. In fact, I have a 15-year-old shopping different cars for me and sending those to me, and also a son who will not watch anything out of the big screen because he says it's all scripted and fake.
Yeah, and I know we ran out of time, but I think the other thing is, like, the oldest person talking about like youth marketing and stuff is 35. Like, what the heck? Like, that's like my dad who, like, he played minor league baseball trying to say that he's like a bowling expert and he's never bowled in his life. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me how people can look at research and say they're interpreting it the same exact way as someone my generation would.
My kids say, I have a voice and I want to use it and I have input, and in fact, the 15-year-old literally sends me a new car link on a great bargain every single day, and it could be that he's going to be 16 soon. I don't know, right? But it might have something. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.